urban farming, um, to advance Berkeley's climate goals. And I really think the kind of program that you are leading, engaging young people in climate justice and being part of the solution is really critical. We know we're facing a climate catastrophe. We do not have time to wait. And while there's a lot that the federal government and state and local government can do, we all have an individual responsibility to address climate change. And it is not just going to take actions like, preparing our community to be more resilient and to reduce our carbon footprint, but also it's going to take advocacy to push the federal government for the kinds of bold transformative changes like a Green New Deal to be able to change our economy and protect our planet. So I was asked to talk a little bit about my life story and about my role as mayor of Berkeley. And, my life story starts when I was 5 years old. I grew up in a working class household in San Francisco. I'm the son and grandson of migrant farm workers who worked in the fields of the Central Valley. And from a very early age, I had a deep social consciousness. And this was really born out of learning about current events at the time. Nelson Mandela was imprisoned and the apartheid regime was still in South Africa. And there were fights for democracy throughout the world. And learning about these injustices made me angry. But I wondered, what can I do? I'm just 5 years old or 6 years old. Like, what role can I play in trying to change things? And my parents said to me, every person has a voice and can make an impact regardless of how old you are, color of your skin, where you're from. We all have a collective responsibility to create social change. And so, learning at an early age around, some of the current events and struggles happening in the world really inspired me to use my voice and to dedicate my life to fighting for social justice and social change. And so at the age of 9 years old, fast forward a few more years, I got involved in a campaign to name a street in my hometown of San Francisco after my hero, Cesar Chavez. And that was a several-year effort that ultimately went to the voters in 1995. And I was not only the first person to unveil the street sign, the Cesar Chavez street sign, but was a key spokesperson in the campaign. And that was my first foray into politics and political campaigns, and how political campaigns could be a means to create change. Thereafter, I got involved in many different social movements, the labor movements, immigrant rights, fighting for housing rights, and ultimately gravitated to Berkeley because of Berkeley's rich history in fighting for social justice and social change. The birthplace of the free speech movement, the anti-war movement, the anti-apartheid movement, and I wanted to be here. I wanted to be part of that history. I wanted to help make that history happen. And so I attended and graduated from UC Berkeley. And while I was at Berkeley, I was very involved in housing justice and in advocating for more affordable housing and protecting tenants. And that led me to serve on our rent board, which is an elected position when I was a student. And then in 2008, I was elected to the Berkeley City Council representing downtown Berkeley, becoming the youngest person ever elected to our city council and the first Latino and only Latino to ever serve on our city council. And the past 12 years, I've really been trying to bring my perspective as an activist to my role in public service and to fight for bold progressive change, whether it's on climate change, whether it's on preserving and protecting affordable housing and tenants, raising the minimum wage, protecting immigrant rights, standing up to Trump. And these past few years have been very challenging for our city and our country and our world. We're in a global pandemic. We just got through 4 years of Donald Trump. We have a climate crisis. But I'm proud that Berkeley is leading on all these issues. And you asked me to talk a little bit about what my day-to-day looks like. Starts at 7 in the morning and usually goes well past 6 o'clock. Pre-pandemic, oftentimes we'd be meeting in person, going to a lot of in-person events and meeting with constituents directly. Obviously, we've had to pivot to this virtual format. But in addition to my role serving as mayor of Berkeley, I also serve in a regional leadership role as president of our regional planning agency called Association of Bay Area Governments, or ABAG. And so a lot of my time is spent not just in Berkeley City Hall, responding to constituents about problems, working, talking to colleagues around public policy, attending city council meetings, but also participating in regional government and helping address issues like our housing and homeless crisis and transportation in the region. What inspired me to get involved in local government and politics? As I said, I come from an activist background, so I actually questioned whether I really wanted to be involved in politics. There was, kind of a skepticism about whether working and serving in government could actually really make an impact, whether direct action and pushing for change on the outside is a more meaningful role. And I decided to, ultimately do an internship in San Francisco City Hall when I was in high school to kind of get an experience about what is it like on the other side to work in government. And, is it actually a way that you can actually get stuff done? And I came to the conclusion that one, yes, working in government, helping shape policy from the inside is an important transformative role to make change happen. And secondly, that local government particularly is, more than federal government or state government, local government is where you can have the most impact. I was a high school student, at a high school in San Francisco, working in the office of then supervisor, now Governor Gavin Newsom. And working in local government also gave me those opportunities to work firsthand with elected officials, to learn on the ground about how government works and how to make change happen. And I just really encourage all of you, if you are interested in getting more involved in your city government, we welcome students to work in our offices. And in fact, it's the students who are the ones who are researching and developing some of the most groundbreaking public policy, and I'm sure Councilmember Bartlett can attest to that. I love my job. Berkeley is such an incredible city, not just because of what we represent, but what we do. And, this past year, particularly during the pandemic, I think, argue one of the most difficult times in the history of our city, I've just been so inspired by the people of Berkeley. We have really put the needs of others above ourselves, following science, taking this pandemic seriously, looking out for the homeless, supporting our businesses, supporting our first responders and nurses and doctors. And it's that compassion and that belief that we need to be part of the larger goal of serving others that I really love about Berkeley. And I'm really I'm lucky to live here, lucky to represent this city, and also to be a city that really is at the cutting edge of really making progressive change happen, whether it's in our city government or whether it's just people who are working in criminal justice or environmental issues, or we have a lot of really visionary people that live in our city and that are really working to transform our society. And in addition, I like that in Berkeley, we're not afraid to shake up the status quo, to push back, to stand up for what we believe in, and to innovate and to try new things. And it's often those new things, whether it's curb cuts to make our streets more disabled accessible, whether it's curbside recycling, whether it's the first city in the nation to divest from apartheid South Africa. Those ideas that are born here in our city spread throughout the country and the world. And I often say that in Berkeley, ideas are born here and movements are also born here. And that is the history that we have to build upon today, dealing with the challenges of our time. One initiative I'm particularly proud of, during my time in office, is not only working to pass the biggest general obligation bond in city history to fund the construction of hundreds of units of permanently affordable housing and to protect housing from demolition and displacement, but particularly one project that's actually underway right now in downtown Berkeley on Berkeley Way between Shattuck and Milvia. It was the old Berkeley Way parking lot. And we decided to dedicate that parking lot to build permanent supportive housing for the homeless and affordable housing for families. And that project will create up to 140 new units, the majority of which will be affordable housing for the homeless. We will have an emergency shelter for unhoused people, and a medical clinic and services provided on site for people experiencing homelessness. This is a really visionary, innovative project that's going to open next year, and I think really represents Berkeley's commitment to ending homelessness. When I came into office, my predecessor, his approach to homelessness was criminalizing the homeless, passing laws to ban people sitting on sidewalks. And I felt that, not only is that incredibly wasteful and expensive, but also that doesn't solve the underlying issue, which is people are without homes. People are victims of our economic crisis and they need help. And we need to work to lift them out of poverty onto a path to self-sufficiency. So I'm proud that over the past 4 years, we have changed our approach to homelessness to one that's focused on housing first and actually working to address the root causes of our homeless crisis. So we know there's a lot more to do. There's no question about it. And this pandemic has resulted in more people becoming homeless, but we need to continue to work towards the goal of ending people's homelessness. One piece of advice I would give everyone is that, once again, regardless of how old you are or where you're from, you have a voice. You can make an impact. And I think if anything, my life story has really told me is that whether you're 5 years old or 9 years old or 16 years old, you have a voice and you have a responsibility to speak out, to get involved, to give back, and to make a difference. And I know that you will. We have amazing young people in Berkeley who are doing all sorts of incredible advocacy. I was really inspired last year by all the organizing and advocacy around the movement to transform policing and in support of Black lives. And I think we just need to continue that advocacy, whether it's our climate crisis, whether it is the fight for racial justice, or whether it is working to transform our society into one that is more just and equitable. So with that, I'll open up to questions. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Arreguin. It's really nice. Oh, thank you, Sol, for putting it in the chat. I guess I'll read them. If you want, you guys can put them in the chat and we can go through. But I just want to say thanks, because it's nice. I know we see you at city council meetings and around, but it's actually nice to get to know your story and a little bit of your background and how, since a young age, it was your parents, and your community that instilled these kinds of ideas of activism in you. Oh, unstable. And ultimately, I'm really happy that, you hear it a lot, you have a voice, you have a possibility to make an impact. And it's something that's maybe overstated, but under listened to. So, the more people that you hear it from, especially people like you, people that look like the students and the people that we're trying to make a better community for, is so, so important. So thank you so much. And okay, Sol's question. What if you were looking back, would there be anything you would change? I'm guessing about your journey to where you are.
Well, I mean, always, I'll just say, first of all, about leadership, and secondly, about my own personal development. So around leadership, you can always, looking back, there's always something you wish you would do differently. I'm actually, for the most part, I'm proud of what we've done here in Berkeley, but you make decisions based on the information you have at the time and what you think is best for the community. And no doubt there are votes that I would have voted differently, but for the most part, I'm proud of what we've accomplished. And I think we've accomplished a lot in 4 years, and there's a lot more that we need to do. Personally, it's a good question. I just say that, don't be afraid to be who you are and to be bold and visionary. And oftentimes, particularly when you're in government, there's a tendency to kind of, swim with the current and, not shake things up. And we need people to shake things up. We need people to be, outspoken, to push really bold ideas, because that's how things are going to change. If people don't push for change, change is not going to happen. We're just going to be stuck with what we have right now. I think we can all agree what we have now is not working. It's decades, generations of, systemic racism, prioritizing, capitalism over the needs of people, no question about it, prioritizing capitalism over our planet. And, it is our generation, my generation, your generation, that has the responsibility, unfortunately, because of these very bad decisions that have been made and laws and perpetuating racism. It's our responsibility to dismantle that and to create a new future and a new paradigm. And it's a big responsibility. But the only way we're going to do that is if we push back and we be bold and we be transformative. So I've learned a lot I've been in elected office for almost 18 years now. I was elected when I was 20 years old to the Berkeley Rent Board. So I've pretty much grown up being a public servant. And I've learned a lot over time. One thing I will say is that regardless of how old you are, that you are always still constantly learning and growing. And as a person, as a professional, as a public servant, I've learned a lot these past 4 years, mainly because I've had to deal with a whole host of challenges, whether it's white supremacists marching on the streets of Berkeley, whether it's fires and power shutoffs, COVID-19, and our deepening poverty and inequality in our city and our country. Be open-minded. Nobody has the answer. Listen. I think be open to new ideas, because oftentimes it's those ideas that are really going to shape your perspective on the world and help you grow as a person. That's what I would offer.
Yeah, really, really important advice. And I see Sol. Sol's also wondering, are you involved or aware of the fight against sexual harassment at Berkeley High School?
Yes. This has been many, many years in the making, and really has been a movement led by students on campus. And the Berkeley City Council did support the Berkeley High School Stop Harassment campaign. The district has a lot more work to do. In fact, I think their Title IX coordinator quit. So clearly there's something wrong going on in the school district system. And they need to make this more of a priority. So yes, very aware of this. We support the work that we support the demands students have for the district. Happy to support the work of students and lift up the work of students, because I think we want to empower and support the student movement that has really been calling attention to this very alarming and unacceptable situation, and use our voice to support that with our colleagues on the Berkeley School Board.
All right, thank you. Sinedra wants to know, do you think you've achieved the goal that 5-year-old you wanted?
Well, I think when I was 5, I didn't want to be a politician. I was going to be a labor organizer or activist. I thought, politicians, skeptical of politicians or elected officials, and their sincerity and their commitment to real commitment to making social change happen. Not surprisingly, because many elected officials are not sincere about their commitment to making bold, transformative, progressive change. But when I first became aware of what's happening in the world, learning about historical events and social movements, being really angry and wanting to do something about it, I wanted to use my voice and use my life to try to make change. And I think I have been doing that, but the problems are so deeply rooted in our society, and some of them are getting worse, frankly, from when I was 5 years old. So I would say I am doing what I set out to do, but at the same time, we have huge challenges that I can't solve, that we have to solve together. There's no question about that. And it's getting worse. Our planet is getting hotter. We're seeing the actual cataclysmic impacts of climate change now. I think there's been, countless fires happening in California. We know we live on the edge of a Tilden Park. Fire risk is real here in Berkeley. Rising sea levels. And all that impacts people of color in low-income communities disproportionately. These frontline communities are most impacted by climate change. And that's because it's decades of systemic racism that's pushed and excluded people of color from living in wealthier neighborhoods, including here in Berkeley, and pushed people to South and West Berkeley, living closer to the freeways and industry. And it's no doubt that we have major disparities in health and education and housing. And that's just the result of decades of systemic racism that was supported by laws and by actions of government to promote racial segregation. And so, I ran for mayor in 2016 because I was deeply concerned about the direction of Berkeley, with just housing becoming more unaffordable, people being pushed out because they can't afford to live here, working families, people of color. I felt the government was being more responsive to the needs of corporate interests and not the people, that we have huge challenges in our country, and Berkeley is a internationally known progressive leader, but that progressive leadership is not being provided in City Hall. And then I didn't know at the time that we'd have a racist, xenophobic president that would be just, destroying our democracy, demonizing immigrants, really undermining everything that we've been working for decades to build. But nonetheless, so that's why I ran. And I ran because there are two Berkeleys. That's the reality, and that's part of what your group is involved in addressing, highlighting, and addressing the systemic racism and inequities that exist in our city in terms of food access and environmental justice. And depending on where you live and the color of your skin, you have a higher rate of early morbidity, having heart disease, asthma, ending up in the criminal justice system. And that shouldn't be the case. And particularly in a city that believes in equity and inclusion, there's a disconnect between the values of what we believe in and actually what is actually happening on the ground in our city. And I do believe that we can bridge the gap between these two Berkeleys and create one Berkeley. I do fundamentally believe that. But it's going to mean that we're going to have to dismantle those systems of systemic racism, whether it's policing, whether it's land use and housing policy, whether it's food access, addressing environmental injustice. But I think we have to, not just for the health and success of our community, but also because I want our city to actually represent and be what we actually want to be and what we claim to be. And I think that's achievable. And that's what drives me every single day to go to City Hall, to work, to try to make change happen. And we have to do it now. I mean, these inequities are becoming even more acute. No doubt people like me and like you are the ones who have succumbed more to COVID-19. Many of us have had family members that have gotten COVID-19 or died due to COVID-19 because we don't have universal health care, and our health inequities are even more pronounced in this pandemic. And so we have a lot of work to do. And I don't want to be pessimistic, but I'm just being honest, and mainly to want to inspire all of you to be part of the change that needs to happen.
Before you select one, I have a question for the mayor.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Can you hear me, Mayor?
Yeah.
Great. So my question is, no universal health care. What do you think are the possibilities of there being a universal income? And by that, I mean, been adopted by other cities, the possibility of a monthly income that augments, even the people who will have future housing that's affordable. What are
two things. One, we need a universal single payer model in California and the United States. No question. We'll continue to fight for that. We need to take the profit out of our healthcare system and recognize that healthcare is a human right, just like housing is a human right. But I do strongly support the idea of guaranteed income or universal basic income. I'm part of a coalition called Mayors for Guaranteed Income. And we are looking at, potentially how to use some of our American Rescue Plan dollars, while also leveraging philanthropy to look at creating a UBI pilot in Berkeley. I think it could be one of many approaches. And I think it's going to be necessary as we're dealing with the pandemic and people have lost jobs and have had hours cut, has to be one part of our kind of economic security model. And I'm actually really excited that the idea is actually becoming more I mean, my friend Michael Tubbs in Stockton was kind of the person who first started the idea with a pilot in Stockton. But now it's spreading all over the country. Oakland's doing it, Sacramento's doing it, DC's looking at doing it. And an idea that seemed kind of out of the box is now actually a reality. And the federal government has actually done it. And the state government's done it by the direct payments that they provided people during the pandemic. So it's not a crazy out of the box idea. It's actually something that I think we're going to need to be able to deal with the deepening inequality that we're dealing with in this country. There was a question, as someone in a group like us trying to advocate for change in Berkeley, I find it hard sometimes to make a significant change because we're not at an age where we can vote. What advice would you give young advocates in Berkeley trying to make change with just their voice? Well, several things. One, we are trying to change the voting age. It's actually something the voters approved in 2016 to lower the voting age for young people between the ages of 16 and 18 to vote in school board elections. So we're still trying to push for that, get the Alameda County to implement that. I would argue that I think we should lower the voting age overall, but that's going to require probably a state constitutional amendment, but it's definitely something I strongly support. I would say there's I was 9 years old, I was 10 years old, but I still got involved in, political campaigns, in, labor, picket lines, got involved working with organizations in the labor movement, in the social justice movement. And so, I think the organizing with the Youth versus the Apocalypse and a lot of climate justice groups that are youth driven is incredibly inspiring, and I think demonstrates that young people organizing around a common goal can have a really profound impact. And I think that's the kind of advocacy that we need to see more of. But we welcome you all to come work with us in City Hall. We also have a youth commission, but I have many high school interns that have worked in my office who've done a lot of really awesome work. We welcome the opportunity to work with you outside of the role as of direct action advocacy. There is a role for young people in City Hall to help work with us to help make change happen.
Awesome. And is this about the time you have to head out?
I'll take one more question, if that's okay.
Yay, okay. Angel wants to know, what are you trying, I guess, what is your most, I'll rephrase your question, Angel. What is on the forefront of your agenda right now? What do you want to see the most progress in?
Well, aside from dealing with the pandemic, and 80% of our city's vaccinated, not surprising, the people that aren't vaccinated are young people and older people of color. And so, the inequities I talked about, we're seeing it in terms of just who's getting vaccinated, who's getting healthcare. And so we have to deal with that. We have to approach our response to COVID-19 with an equity lens. My focus, the main thing I'm working on right now is around our housing crisis. And not just, we actually, in Councilmember Bartlett, credit him, his leadership and speaking out about this. Earlier this year, we passed a resolution to say that we would end exclusionary zoning in Berkeley because some of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Berkeley have been literally closed off, walled off to people of color and to working families. And so we're trying to dismantle that issue of systemic racism through, trying to allow more housing in certain parts of our city. We're trying to work to protect tenants from displacement. I've introduced a Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, which would give tenants the opportunity to buy their buildings when their owner puts it on the market, with the goal of trying to help curb speculation in our city and keep people in our community. We're working to build more affordable housing and preserve existing affordable housing. And then I'm also working on all this stuff on the regional level. So for me, housing, except with the addition of the pandemic, the housing crisis is the most acute and the most visible issue that we're facing as a community. And it is I'm laser focused on this. And it gets to the core of who we are as a city. Because if people can't afford to live in our community, then we're going to become whiter, we're going to become more exclusive, we're going to be less progressive, the housing crisis is transforming the face of our city. And it's not acceptable that you all may not be able to stay in Berkeley after you graduate high school. And that's sadly a reality for many generations of Berkeley High students who graduate, who just can't afford to stay unless they live with their parents. That's not fair. It's not fair that people that work in our cafes and clean our buildings and, and are the lifeblood of our economy, work in our kitchens, they can't afford to live here too. So they drive further and further, in their cars, contributing to climate change, when they should be able to live here in the community that they represent. And generations of people that have lived here are being pushed out because real estate speculators are coming and trying to buy their buildings because they want to make a profit. And so I really do believe that we need to advance a housing policy with the goal and recognition that housing is a human right and that government has a responsibility to guarantee access to housing for everyone. And that is going to mean that we're going to have to transform our housing market into one that is less speculative and one that's more people centered. And that's what we're trying to do in Berkeley. And we're going to continue to keep working on it. And Councilmember Bartlett's been a great leader in that effort.
Yeah,
I do not want to change careers. I'll respond to that last question.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, like I said, I was skeptical about whether working in government was actually going to result in anything meaningful and whether this was what I should be doing. And I've come to the realization, I think this is what I need to do to help make change happen. And I think all of us, we have a calling. And I think, we will discover that at some point in our lives, something that really drives us. And I hope for all of you that your calling is public service, because we need really awesome young people to serve in public office, but it may not be. But I hope that calling is rooted in the belief and recognition that we have to dedicate our lives for something greater than us, something that is in the greater good of not just us, but future generations. And that we have a responsibility to give back, especially here in Berkeley, because that's what we're known for. And that's what we need to do. So thank you for having me. I'm happy. Really great to meet all of you. And if you're interested in getting involved, please, I think you all have my contact information. You can send it around. We're looking for interns to work in our office, work with us on projects. Would love to work with you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Arreguin, for sharing your story, the work you're doing, and most importantly, just the advice you're giving, I think speaks so much more and is something that I'm taking away, and especially I know our students are taking away too. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we also have Councilmember Ben Bartlett here.
Hello and
Good
welcome.
morning.
Hello, good morning. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Hi.
Well, always a pleasure to hear the mayor talk. He's such an inspiration. I've known him for like 12 years. We've been friends for a long time. And so I'm always impressed and inspired by him. Such a great story, great track record too. Amazing.
18 years, is it 20 years?
Yeah, incredible, right?
Yeah. So I don't know if I sent you some questions. The format is really just kind of sharing your journey.
Oh,
now.
okay.
But
What was the first question?
I can pull them up, but really if you can just start of like, what inspired you to be in public, or also you can talk about your other job.
I have them here in my calendar. You want me to go through the questions? Is that easier? Because I'll ramble all day if there's no structure. Politicians can talk. So what is my educational background and career path that led to this position, right? So my education was not really geared towards this. I did study some government, but I was more studying classics and creative writing and some economics. I was really into ancient history and really into creative writing. Those are my main interests. But in doing that, you learn about government politics, because half of the study of ancient history is our governance systems, right? Democracy, et cetera. So I became well versed in the principles that we all are relying on in government. And so I went to high school and then went to college. But I was very social, like to have fun, and I was in student government. I was class president all the time. Actually every year, every year in every school, I was class president, and just having fun with my friends and getting elected and stuff, right? Being silly. But my parents were activists from Berkeley. We're from Berkeley, and so my parents were activists. My mother was a Black Panther. My father was a radical activist as well. And so I was aware of all the movement. I grew up going to, I remember going to Cesar Chavez protests as a little kid. That's kind of my first memories of stuff at the supermarkets and the strawberries, things like that. There was a protest about agricultural labor. And the mayor might have been at the same protests, as a much younger fellow. And so, so I was always, I had the critique. I grew up with my parents critiquing, Reagan, right, and critiquing the war machine, and being aware of poverty and unfairness and injustice, and just having my core sort of vantage point, my perspective be about people and about people's rights. And so so I had that going on in my household. So I was political minded, right? But I wasn't really into it. I was into having fun and into just having a good time and living my life. And then what is that the next? What's the next? Oh, I saw I'd tell you those stories. So then I ended up then going to New York afterwards, and working in theater. I went to Carnegie Hall and got my MFA in theater. I was producing plays and writing plays and acting and directing off Broadway and way off Broadway, like underground theater, like in people's loft apartments and warehouses, with DJs and stuff. It was really an amazing time to be young in New York. It was before it got super gentrified in Brooklyn. So we were there, me and my friends, just in a raw part of town called Williamsburg that is not raw anymore. Now it's like Beverly Hills, but back then it was raw warehouses and all people in the early 20s, and we had no structure. So we had meetings every month just with people in the community saying, what should we do next? Because the landlords let us do whatever we wanted. So we said, oh, we need a coffee shop. Oh, we need a yoga studio. Oh, we need a cafe or another bicycle repair shop. And so we would just work on them and build them. And we'd do fundraisers with big DJ parties and plays to pay for it. And it was my first foray into raw governance, where you had a free zone with very little actual government and young people who had some time and some vision. And we started making things, right? Making a society. It was really cool. We even had like police, kind of, if somebody was known to be bad or be harassing women at parties, they had people that would come see them and visit them. It was really crazy. It was a lot of fun. It was a great moment in history. And that moment is over, by the way. Got priced out of there and they kicked us all out. And so, so then I kept with the entertainment world. I was producing TV shows in LA, producing reality TV shows, Survivor and Amazing Race, Hell's Kitchen, just turning my writing skills into writing these people's stories, right? And this is important because that's all I do now is the same stuff, but I do it in government. So, I ended up wanting to get more serious after a while because my childhood extended so many years, and Barack Obama was running for president, and that gave me the opportunity to get serious again, because I was really longing for something realer, and I wanted to be a part of something tangible instead of what I was doing in Hollywood. So I was getting older, right? And so when Barack came, I signed up and I went to Minnesota, and I was there for many months. doing town halls, organizing events. I was speaking about his agenda all over the place. It was amazing. It was a lot of work, and eventually he won. And then, but he came to town, and there was a thing that kind of changed everything. He took all of us organizers to this North Dakota wind turbine factory because he was promoting the clean energy agenda, right? So wind power, solar power. And we all went to this massive warehouse in North Dakota where there was, we were making these wind turbines, these windmills, right, for energy. And he turned and he said, "This is the future. Get with this."
Mhm.
And he looked at us, and he like looked at me. It was like, "This is the future. Forget about what you're thinking about. This is the future." And so I took that as a personal message to get into the future. So with that, I pretty much packed up, left LA, and I didn't know how to do it or how to enter um, this world of renewable energy and giving back and stuff. But I knew I could find it in Berkeley because my father was still here, and I know Berkeley touches everything and gives you lots of access to stuff. So I came here, moved back home to Berkeley, set up a little coffee shop with my dad, and then I met the local council member, and I met Jesse Arreguin when he was a council member, and this council member appointed me to the Zero Waste Commission, and I didn't know anything about that. That's like the recycling commission, right? The garbage commission. I didn't know anything about it, but they said, if you want to learn this stuff, go here. So I went to the meetings, a couple times a month, and I read about stuff, and eventually I helped the city create its first garbage into energy deal, and for the people of Berkeley, and it was a big deal. It was amazing, and then that led for someone to suggest I go to law school to do environmental law, and so I applied to law school and got in, and did environmental law and started doing this more and more of this stuff, working on electric vehicles and renewable energy, and then going into finding ways to help low-income people participate. So I took a job in a place that does just that. So I created these tools for low-income people to get electric cars, and it's so much more. It was amazing work. And so in that time, I was sort of just learning how government can be effective, and how the private sector can work with government to make changes. And this is about renewable energy and poverty. So using the vision, right, to help low-income people get into the new economy, which is new energy. And that takes private money and government. So I learned both of them together, and I was really happy. And at this time, back in Berkeley, my mother, who was also living here, she was a retired school teacher, and she was living in a building with a bunch of other school teachers, and they were really happy. It was a happy scene. There were like the Golden Girls in there. Every day was a dream. They were retiring. They were paying $300 a month rent. They were retired, living in a fantastic place. And then a developer bought their building and kicked them all out. And the way they kicked them out was very brutal. They turned off their water, turned off their heat in the winter. The workers would harass them, scratch their cars, scare them with like big wrenches. It was everything you hear about, right? And this was the third time that's happened to me, because it happened to me in New York and happened to me in Venice, LA. And now it's happened to my mother here in Berkeley. This, wherever cool people go,
Right.
the mean gentrifiers always follow.
Yes.
So you'll find that, young people, whatever city you move to, you're going to make it cool because you're young and creative. And then immediately behind you is going to become some evil developers who are going to monetize your coolness and sell it to someone else and kick you out. I went back to my old neighborhood in Brooklyn, and it's all investment bankers living there.
Mhm.
And this was a place where we had DJs and dancers and photographers and playwrights, and people like me. And now it's all bankers, right? So that's what's going to happen unless we get smart and create some solidity
Yeah.
and some foundation to your life, so you can be rooted somewhere while you fulfill your dreams and live your life and start a family. You don't have to be pushed around and pushed out because your coolness attracted money to your neighborhood. Right? So my mom and them, right? So this is South Berkeley. South Berkeley's always been cool. This was like the coolest part of town. Earth, Wind, and Fire used to play in the streets here
Yep.
on weekends, on Shattuck, you know, in the medians, you know. I mean, every corner had a party and people dancing, people talking, and it was a lot of fun. And so, you know, and now of course it's like, you know, it has been the lower income area, the poorer people, and so it's an easy place to penetrate for developers, right? And you know, to because the market wants richer people to pay higher rent, right? And the schools added thousands of people at the university, so they're putting them into South Berkeley. So anyway, I ended up I went to the rent board, you know, I knew about the rent board, and we went there and got some help. But there was a moment that happened that day that kind of changed everything for me, which put me on this path I'm on. One of my mom's roommates was going to go with her, and he was an elderly person, really, you know, he was a great American hero. He was a veteran in the Korean War. He had worked at the docks and refused to load the packages to South Africa when we were fighting apartheid. He was a real hero from Berkeley. And at the door to the hearing for the rent board is him and my mom going in. They're going to go together. And he stopped at the door and he said, "I'm not going to go in." I said, "Why not? Let's just do the hearing so get you guys some money and get you set up again." And he said, "No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what happens here, because I know that if they don't want you here, you can't stay." And so that, you know, that level of defeatism and disrespect on the other side was really got my goat. It made me really angry. I said, "What do you mean? You who are they? This is you. This is your life, your community. You've helped build this country. You get to stay, right? You determine who stays, right?" And I was so upset. And then I was like, okay, well, let me get some, in case the hearing goes bad, I researched senior housing for them. And I was like, okay, well, if worse comes to worse, they'll do some senior housing. Well, who knew that the senior housing wait list was 14, 15 years?
Yep. Yeah.
And so so all of a sudden my eyes were opened up, right, to the housing crisis, the cruelty crisis, the lack of protection, the lack of planning, the lack of investment. And, you know, when I learned about that the county that we're in had, like, I don't know, a surplus of so much money, like $1 billion, whatever I forget the number that year, it was a massive surplus. And I was like, if the surplus is like this, but seniors are in wheelchairs on the street, homeless, who's in charge here? And so that's when, after talking around to people and I couldn't figure out who could help us, I decided to become the person that helps us. And so I decided to run for office and ran hard on a mission. And the mission was, you know, was to leverage all my outside the box thinking that you get as a playwright and a Hollywood person or whatever I am, and as a Black Panther, to leverage all that stuff to bring new ideas and articulate it in a way that's persuasive and brings people in. And so it was about housing, it was about economic justice, and about health justice. And so I ran on all these things. It was a big hard race. There were like 4 people, all of them older and established and knowing everybody in town. They've been here 30 years working. I've been living in New York and LA, just back for, you know, at that point, back for 6 years maybe. But they knew everybody, right? School boards and PTAs, you know, all the parents. And all I knew was I was on a mission. And I had energy, and I did have experience because I had worked on the Barack Obama's campaign and other campaigns, so I knew how to organize and go door to door like a champ. And so I did that, and we won a very big win over these people with a very large margin. And then we started hitting it hard, and we've not stopped. Now, so I hate doing these long monologues. Do you want to ask me some questions, or do you want me to go down these questions?
Yeah, you can. There was one specifically I wanted to ask the mayor as well. but just like being in like the public every single day, how do you take care of yourself? And don't you get drained? Don't you get tired sometimes? Like personally for me, sometimes I feel like I just need time to myself. But like if you're in such a demanding role, how do you do that?
Yeah, it's very hard. It's very hard. So especially in the mayor's position, because everyone's after him, and in my position, South Berkeley. South Berkeley is the activist neighborhood. So everyone here is super engaged. So, and they're also the center of the old guard, like what I come out of, but then also the new people, like these new, like, bicycle activist types, right? And these YIMBY types, right? The new white people, right? And so both sides have competing aims oftentimes, and both sides are highly energized, and both sides voted for me. So I have to constantly input both sides and merge them into a win for both sides. And so that requires tons of phone calls. And there's also tons of complaints because South Berkeley's been neglected. I don't know how this went on all these decades, but we got the short shrift for like 40 years.
Yeah.
So our streets are messed up. There is like the nonprofits have no support mechanisms. I got to plug in. I mean, there's so much, right? The homelessness, the poverty, the healthcare stuff, so I'm dealing with all of these complaints and trying to fix them all too. So it's a lot. And also I have to work, right? It doesn't pay enough in the new Berkeley, right? The new Berkeley does not pay enough to just be on council, unless you're, living like I was back in Brooklyn, roommates and, whatever, cheap apartment. But we're trying to live and start a life. I have a wife and a daughter. I'm trying, like my salary pays for my babysitters. So I have to work too, right? So that's tricky, all juggling work and family. So I think it's super important to get self-care. I just check out randomly, like once a week. I'll just drop out and I'll sleep all day, or just like lay on the couch and read a magazine all day. I try to exercise. That helps you withstand more, help you be in more of attack mode than defensive mode. And I try to meditate every single morning. And so I think that is probably the most effective thing to keep everything harmonized and balanced. And I learned early on to not be reactive when people are yelling at me. So that was the hardest part for me, because I'm 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 from South Berkeley. I'm from all these places where you can't yell at you can't yell at somebody. There'll be consequences, right? And so I had to learn. It took me like over a year to, when someone yells at me, to not get mad, not push back, to recognize that they're yelling at something else. You're just having to be the face of this thing they're yelling at. It has to do with their own issues, right? And so as soon as I conquered that reactivity to people yelling at me and stuff like that, then things got a lot easier. So, do you want these questions, or do you want to say something?
Yeah, and I think you can go through some more of those questions. I don't remember what we're all on there.
All right. So yeah, my day to day is pretty intense. I get up at 5:30. I read a bunch of journals and publications, because I focus on innovation. I don't know if you looked at my legislative work at all, but my focus is the new ideas, right? So I'm always reading on what's happening, forecasting what's going on. Like for instance, this morning I read all about this publication done by this think tank called the RAND Corporation. It's the whole plan for China, and how they're I read the whole thing saying America can have a limited war with China in the China Sea. It'll take about 1 year. It'll damage their economy maybe 35%, damage U.S. economy maybe 5%. It's because we have 9 years to prevent China from having global domination. And so I read the whole report, and so I'm thinking, okay, well, it's part of my toolkit to start planning, right? And what that means for government, what it means for business, that's how I make my living, is advising people, and then of course applying it to my work in government as well. So that's just like, so then I read up on stuff in the morning, and then read emails, then get up and work out, get my daughter up and out of the house, hopefully if there's a babysitter that day, then take a series of Zooms. Monday is my city council day, so I'll do like 40 Zoom calls a day, like every 30 minutes. And then on a Tuesday through Friday, I'm working with my clients. I'm writing contracts for them. I'm advising them about what they're doing. I work a lot in crypto, and advising social impact funds who invest in all the things that transform poverty in the world, right? From healthcare to housing, all that stuff. So work with these clients and helping them get on their way. And then I'm also looking for new clients. I'm emailing people, and I'm my own business, right? So when you're in your own business, there's only you. You gotta service and you gotta bring it in. So I'm doing both hats, right? And then taking calls from the city of Berkeley all the time, every day. I gotta stop what I'm doing to deal with something. There's a clinic around the corner where a woman died. That happened a couple weeks ago, and that derailed my whole week, because they were negligent, or they treated her. So now I'm gonna come up with a plan to start regulating our local healthcare providers, right? And so so now I start talking to people, socializing it, talk to other council members, talk to the city attorney, talk to the reporters to get the reporters ready for a story, building a whole campaign around what I'm going to be doing. So that's like a typical day. And then, the nighttime, of course, right? Family, then watching some Netflix, then reading something else, and going to bed. Okay, and then let me go back over to your list. What inspired me? I told you what inspired me. Self-care, and told you the meditation and learning to not take anything personally, right? But it's important too. You got to remember, my father had a saying before he died. He said, whoever told you you were put here to be someone's doormat was lying to you. And so just like, us as a group of people, we were not here to be a doormat to the system or to whoever, right? Whoever exploits and weakens the people. And that's not, we allow that. And we don't have to allow that. That's the fundamental core lesson that humans have got to get down. And if you study history, you see it. Those who have that core strength are never conquered. You look at Vietnam, right? Afghanistan, just look at it. It's just, if you refuse to be conquered, you will not be conquered. Right. And so, so our job is to, teach that lesson and help give people the courage to be tough. And so so I'm saying that because it's also on the individual level, because, I don't let people yell at me. I mean, people, I don't react when they yell at me, but I also do not harbor disrespect, and I respect myself, and they don't control me. And that's the big lesson for a politician to get down, is to not be controlled.
So I have a question. You read those heavy journals like the RAND think tank. People don't know about McNamara in Vietnam, but because that's an amalgamation of big business, and every time we go to war, it's about some kind of national security, which really is about protecting big business and their interests in every country. So I'm curious and also excited about the fact that you delve into something on such a large level and know that its impact is going to come down to where we live, and that the policies, if no one is aware of these policies, then those who have the wherewithal get away with taking us to Iraq or Iran or Vietnam. And the activity that you came to the table with, I do also believe you are Ron Dellum's nephew.
Yeah, yeah.
So your political roots are deep. And so I just want the students to know that, as you said, you never stop learning and you never stop self-educating with your interactions that you have with people, learning how to be impacted. You're impacted by people who are upset or angry for whatever reason. And so we're not just talking homeless, we're talking business interests, and being able to take yourself out of it and realize, as you said, it's not about you, but it's about who you're representing. So your city council, your target, because they know on some level, supposedly, you can make changes, but those changes come because people protest and you hear about it. I've sat through those city council meetings that last till 11 at night. So
You know,
you should know about your daily work. So for you to get up 5:30 to do your reading, by the way, a lot of times when I'm in school, that's when I would get up because it's quiet. And then go through that day and then end your evening at a city council meeting. It really does take stamina on your part. And the idea that you meditate and all of that, we try to get our students to do before we check in or as a check-in, right?
Yeah,
She has them go through some type of,
like we tried to do, it's just something I've been trying to do, like a gratitude list in the morning before bed.
great.
Or try to not look at my phone when I wake up first thing, you know,
Yeah.
check in with myself. Sometimes I fall asleep because I just lay there and I don't get up. But yeah, taking that time for myself, that's what we've really
That's
been trying,
great.
yeah, tell our students.
Yeah, gratitude and forgiveness are what it's all about.
yeah,
Gratitude and forgiveness.
yeah.
And you know, if you can conquer those two and really embrace those two core facets, your life goes in a great direction. And if you, and the list making is important because you learn to you create a roadmap. The things you're grateful for ends up taking a shape. And like, you know, but you're been grateful for one all your past, but you'll start to see your list of things you're grateful for, it starts to take a direction. Like, I'm so grateful for this opportunity that I got to serve in council and I got to meet this certain person over here. And now I'm thinking this way, you know. It ends up helping you build a roadmap. And that's the key thing. Your number 7 is I wish I had created more of a roadmap early on for my life. You know, there's 2 competing goals, right? You don't want to laminate yourself, right? That's the key thing. You always want to evolve and change, and you know, but I feel like I hadn't, my childhood extended a little too long. And if I just cut it short by like 5 years, I'd be way more effective at this point than I am now. Because I for one, I just cannot believe that we're still having the same racial arguments that we're having when I was a kid. I just can't believe it. I feel like there's a collective massive failure in that we are still having the same stuff. And it's unbelievable. You know, this is 50 years after the Civil Rights Act passage. And, you know, I just can't believe it. The school systems, the segregation, the police is the visible thing you see, right? But that's just a flashpoint. It's really so much more than that. And I just can't believe it's still happening. So, you know, I don't want to die having not helped turn the page on that. And so that's what I think about, right? So that would be my advice, to get a little more focused a little bit earlier. Yeah, still enjoy myself, you know, but at a certain point, shift over and make it be about others a little sooner.
That takes me back to a quote from the last poet, or Gail Scott Heron, can't remember. But he said it's more important to die for a cause than because. So you're somewhere and incidentally you get knocked off, right? If I'm going down, it's because I've committed myself. And in that commitment, either I get to continue or I'm out of the picture, but at least it was because I lived my life with something that I felt was greater than me, right? And so that takes us to engaging with you, being involved with the Santa Fe right-of-way. And I know our students have had some insights, and I would really like to know if anyone has something they would like to ask our esteemed council member. So does anyone out there have a question or a comment to share out of that chat group? Well, if you go to the next question, then we'll look and see if anybody said anything.
Okay, so what do I enjoy most, and what have been the greatest challenges? Yeah, I enjoy actually like I enjoy that I'm able to actually make big change, right? And so Berkeley is a place where you can do things and everyone studies it around the country and often adopts it, California and the country. And I've done a few things that have really impacted everyone, and I'm really excited about, really proud of that fact. On the local level, like just being able to, there was one, they were going to route airplanes over South Berkeley from the airport, and these planes drop a lot of fuel, a lot of toxicity, there's noise, and it's really toxic. This is what they call environmental injustice, where they put poor people next to highways, as the mayor said, and also next to factories and underneath airplane routes. And they dump thousands of pounds of jet fuel in the course of a year on people, right? And they get sick. Oh, somebody's back, my little daughter. It causes cancer and all that stuff, right? So they're going to route our planes over Berkeley. And in 1 week, I was able to get enough support to kill the whole plan at the FAA. Yeah, so I mean that was like a concrete major victory. Another time was when the George Floyd thing happened. People were really upset. People didn't know what to do. I was upset, and so we ended up having a major march. I created a march with a marching band and a New Orleans style jazz funeral where we buried racism. And we marched from South Berkeley to downtown and did a huge event, 30,000 people, and we buried racism. Okay. Sorry. Hey, sweetie. So we buried racism. We take a big casket. We put the names of, lots of victims of racism and racial terror in the casket, and we buried it, and put dirt on it, and put a tree on it, and it was amazing. And then with that, that event gave me the collective buy-in citywide to pass the George Floyd Act that I wrote. And that just recreates the police department. It creates a mental health care unit. There's all these things, right, that the people would benefit from, and that's been copied now all over the country, that item. So I'm very proud of that. And then on the homelessness, my major initiative that I passed 5 years ago to create a new form of homeless housing that goes. So typically, homeless housing is just as expensive as normal housing to make it.
Yeah.
That can cost $1 million for each apartment.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have thousands of homeless people in a community, or in the state, 250,000 maybe, $1 million a unit, $1 million an apartment is, it's impossible.
Right.
You will never be able to do that. So what we did was we created a new model where the apartments are prefabricated and state of the art, and there's a healthcare center on the first floor, and we did this complicated maneuver where it's privately owned land and city pays rent to own, and it ends up basically costing 20% of the cost, and it gets built, instead of getting built in 3-4 years, it gets built in 4 months, 3 months. So that is a major thing that I created that is going to be, it's already impacting the entire country. And our building called Step Up Housing goes up on University Avenue sometime next couple of months. And you'll hear about it. It's a major showpiece, and it will be copied all over the region as a homeless solution and as a healthcare solution, because it's like a small hospital. So I'm really proud of that. I'm also proud of the racial. I did a racial. How to describe this? So it's in California, you cannot give city contracts to people based on gender or race. They changed this law 30 years ago, and as a result, all these cities and counties in the state have not been contracting with people of color or women-owned businesses or small businesses. And a further result, you see this massive economic dislocation happening in California, where the wealth concentration is growing so tight and everyone else is getting nothing. And we're the poorest state in the union right now and the richest. And by the way, Berkeley mirrors that to the T, right?
Yeah.
Everything you see in the country is in Berkeley. And in South Berkeley. South Berkeley has the poorest people and the richest man in Berkeley. Both live in South Berkeley. Yeah, multi-billionaire, right? So there's we have all that, right? And we passed a thing called the Berkeley Inclusion and Diversity Index. It's a BINDEX, we call it the BINDEX, and it just finds new ways to it does a study to determine all of the discrimination in city contracting that's gone on in the last 20 years, and then it allows you to redress it and fix it, even if it means favoring women and minorities, because that's the reparative nature of it. It's a creative way around the bar on the law, right? And the third thing, this one's I'm probably the most famous for, is when Donald Trump lowered the tax rate, it limited our ability to use basically rich people's taxes to finance affordable housing. It's a complicated thing called tax equity finance, but tax credits, right? You can read about that later, tax credits. But so we decided to crowdfund the funding to do things. And we created the first ever, digital municipal bond. It's a crypto bond using blockchain technology. And it's called the microbond, and it's coming out this fall as well. 5 years ago, we passed it. Now it's going to happen this fall. And these are ways for ordinary people to own a financial asset, because most bonds cost $500,000. You can't buy them. They're for rich people. They go to big projects. But in this new vision, because of the technology, you can issue a bond for 50 cents or 25 cents. A bond for $1.
Yeah, I've got something, a comment I want you to, as a person who's an environmental lawyer. So my understanding that in order to have a crypto system, it takes a lot of energy to do that and to keep those computers or whatever cool, et cetera, et cetera. Are you by any chance trying to help them come to a better machine?
Yeah, so I've there's two answers to this. So first off, what you're describing, this proof of work technology, that's for like the original stuff. That's the original. That's Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Old Ethereum, right? And the new stuff is not like that. The new blockchains are almost no energy. Very, very, very well done, right? So there's that, right? But on the other hand, though, this argument was put out by banks, because banks are fighting crypto because it democratizes money.
Right.
In reality, we can start with every form of currency. The credit cards, Visa and those guys, energy usage is insane. Right. They process tens of thousands of transactions a second, right? They don't publish what they do. Second, the gold, the diamonds, the nickel,
Mhm.
right on the quarter here, the metal, all comes from African slave mines and horrible, horrible energy and labor.
Right,
And I mean, really horrible, way more energy comes into producing a nickel
right.
than a Bitcoin. And
Yeah.
then thirdly, and this one's the most comprehensive, is the dollar. Our actual monetary supply is backed by petroleum. So the petrodollar
Yeah.
is the source of all of the pollution in the world and all of the wars.
Right.
So there's actually, if you really look at it, there's no actual comparison. There's no,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, World
So,
War, World
so
War II,
yeah.
and
So
Vietnam
this,
and Iraq. All
right.
petrol.
Yeah. So this is a revolution because this is affordable. This is a way for ordinary people to get money and make money and create businesses and do things without, the legacy banks and systems that lock you out. And so that's why they're fighting it, because this is a revolution.
That's so insightful. I mean, that's just the side of the coin. Unless I might have caught Democracy Now, I would have never known.
Yeah.
And so this is something that gives me added ammunition when I'm having a discussion. One of the things that I've noted in what you shared with us is you do a lot of collaborating and communicating and melding to address and come up with a resolution to whatever the issue is. That skill obviously is very important. When you did the casket and when you did the issue with the planes flying overhead, that was almost the equivalent of knocking on the door, how you won the election, right? Because there's nothing like having that one-to-one or one to a group, but you're there, you're not what we're doing right now. So you're really touching the flesh and shaking the hands, etc. For you, is that like a really main tool besides your creative ideas in order to make something happen?
Yes, absolutely. And and I was very shy growing up, and I didn't like the way I talked even. So my father and mother pushed me into this to conquer that. So remember, there's an old adage by the Stoics were a Greek school of thought, and I forget the main person for who's the Stoics, but he said the obstacle is the way. And so I went out there a lot of times, door to door, for other campaigns, for people, door to door, even though I hated it. It was hard, it was uncomfortable. I stumbled over words, but eventually I learned how to work it, how to bring people together. And now I do it on all sorts of levels. So you're exactly right. This is all organizing, and it's organizing around a creative idea. So in my artistic life, I would come up with a play, I'd write the play, and then get a theater and book it for one night, and then promote it, get the team involved, cool art form, and get everyone to come see it, and sell the tickets and do the show. So it's the same idea, only this time instead of plays, it's novel legislation that does something for people that's exciting. And I'm right now, it's funny, I'm in organizing mode for my new health initiative. South Berkeley has the hardest, the most entrenched health inequities in the city of Berkeley. And everything we've been doing is not working. So this is where I come in and try the new stuff. And so right now we created a health innovation zone around South Berkeley into downtown and somewhat west for the hardest hit people. And what that means is leverages all the healthcare companies and technology companies and community healthcare work companies, like the nonprofit agency types, and lets them all work together using tools to try new things on this population. And it's a big undertaking, and it's being created right now. And part of that is the world's first health impact bond, where we set up a system that says if we can get this number of people that go to the emergency room twice a week, if we can get them to not go and get them healthy, then the savings that the government gets from those from those the ER visits and medication, those savings then can be shared with someone who invests in the program. And so this is a revolution because it motivates change and it drives change. And so I have all these people around the country helping me do it, ready to invest in it. I have people from healthcare companies ready to create these community healthcare worker models. I have technology companies ready to do diabetes management, ready to do they can scan your teeth with an iPad.
Wow.
So you don't, so that, so you can spot what's going on early, get to the dentist. I mean, there's so much. And there's community healthcare workers. And then the key part is the UBI, the basic income, because people are poor on top of the other issues. And so if you can give someone $1,000 a month, they can, one, make their co-pays for medication, two, remove the stress. So they know rent's going to be okay. They got this extra money for this and that, and they can also pay for better food. And remember, diabetes is costing America 7% of our gross domestic product. So what's our GDP? 23 trillion a year. So 7% of that is spent on diabetes alone. So, so we can get people, the cushion from a basic income and combine that with a community healthcare worker to check on them and get them connected to services and make sure they're taking their meds and, all the stuff you got to do to be well. That's going to transform healthcare in America. And it's going to work first here in Berkeley. So that's what I'm working on that right now. I've been on the phone all morning talking to people, getting them ready. The county's going to help me do the pilot. I have different healthcare companies going to participate and help fund as well. So yeah, this is my next big move. This is going to be my signature legislation and before I leave.
Exciting.
Yeah. And it's all organizing. And I made a pretty little deck. It's got a good name. It's got a good title. It's got a good flow. It has good characters, a good story, right?
Yeah.
And I sell it like a play or a TV show.
So interesting. I had no idea your background was like creative arts. I feel like I wouldn't guess that looking at anyone on the city council. But yeah, you really do. You tie together what you're good at and what you had experience and what you really enjoyed and were passionate about. And we can tell, I can tell you're passionate about it now and what you're doing, because really I find if you don't have the drive, if you don't have the excitement about it, the drive, like you're the one that's going to be pushing it forward. Of course, with the help of other people and connecting, but you have to be the one with the drive and the spark to do it. And you have that, so.
Yeah, it's important too to remember, and I got this bit of advice from Elon Musk's ex-wife. So she was there. She saw him get rich, right? She saw the whole thing from the beginning.
Right.
She said what it was he got good at two things: engineering and marketing. And they're two different, disparate things, and he put them together.
Yeah.
And so she said, having seen that, she studied it and says that's the model for success.
Yeah.
To get good at two different things, very different,
Mm-hmm.
and then put them together, and you just go straight to the moon.
And then
So in this instance, with me, it would be, artistic stuff, right? Theater and storytelling, and policy.
Yeah.
It's so different.
The other common thread that I am hearing, and I may be interpreting, and you may not be saying this, but I totally think you are, is that you have to do the legwork. You can't bring me on board if you can't tell me that the diabetes in South Berkeley is higher than it is in Alameda County, in any of the other, than Oakland, than Richmond. Those are the things you need to come to the table with. So students it involves, and this is what he demonstrates. This is what our council member demonstrates. You do the legwork, you do the research, because you don't want people to say, well, what about this? And you go, let me get back to you. When you come to them, you need to have it much together as you can in order to be successful in whatever you endeavor.
Yeah.
I really see you doing that.
Oh, thank you. That's so important. You got to make the case.
Yeah.
You always have to make the case. And here's the thing, the system as is, it suits people very well that are doing okay. So they don't want to change it. And if you look at every year, all this, like I said, right? I still can't believe we're having the same arguments. Every year you see the poverty growing, you see the health inequities growing, you see the racism growing, just the isolation growing, and all these legacy people in power, and legacy institutions in power, and legacy groups that are managing things for people are not affecting this. So I mean, it real talk, it means they have to go.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what's happening.
Yes.
The systems that they're using, that they've branded us into, that we're like, oh, okay, I'm a Democrat. Oh, I'm a Democrat. What does that mean when we have the highest poverty rate in the country, and when the majority of Black boys can't read
Yeah.
in schools? So what does it mean that I'm a Democrat? It doesn't mean anything. And what does it mean that you're part of my coalition? Da, da, da. I mean, it's good for getting me elected, but it doesn't mean anything for the people, because the proof is in the pudding. And so, you know, that's really, if you're going to get involved in service, you have to approach it from that standpoint. Otherwise, just enjoy your private life. Go do the best you can do at living your life. Be the best family person and the best whatever donut maker, whatever you decide to do with your life. Be the best at it and have the most fun and be the kindest. But if you're going to get in the game and try to you know, affect change, you gotta really affect change, because the change is paramount to saving us all.
Oh, 11:30. Oh,
Any
goodness.
questions?
Yeah, did you have any last
Comment?
questions? Let me see. Yeah, I think you covered all the questions and more. Those are really just, you know, general guide. But yeah, this was great. I feel like I've just gotten so much life advice in the past like hour. It's really awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, I love talking to young people. Always do. And it's so important. You know, a lot of times people, especially people of color, just don't have good mentors, you know, don't have, you know,